The ground was dry and cold. The wind blew softly over the red sand, carrying the last sounds of crying away. Talani lay inside the wooden box, her hands tied, her legs weak, her voice broken. She had screamed when they dropped her in, but no one listened. Her tribe had turned their backs. She was no longer useful, they said. She could not bear a child. To them, that meant she had no value, no place, no right to breathe. Her people believed the soil must take back the ones who could not give life. They buried the empty women before sunset, without names, without markings. It was their way, their law, their curse. Talani trembled in the darkness, her breath thin, the air was running out, her chest ached, and her tears soaked the cloth in her mouth. She couldn't scream anymore, only whisper, "I don't want to die." Time slowed. The silence grew heavy. All she could hear now was the beating of her heart, and the soft scratching of dirt settling on top of her box. This was it. Buried alive because she could not give birth. Buried alive because she was different. But far away, beyond the cliffs, a small human craft was scanning the ground. It hovered low, its sensors sharp, its pilot focused. Dr. Elias Ward was alone on this forgotten planet, sent here to search for lost biosignals from a crashed medical pod. He expected ruins, maybe damaged tech, nothing more. But then, his scanner beeped sharply. Unknown movement. Life detected. Depth. 2 meters. He frowned, adjusted the sensors, and read again. There shouldn't be anything alive underground here, he muttered. He followed the signal, landed, and grabbed his portable digger. The machine roared as it sliced through sand and stone. Below, Talani felt the box vibrate. Her eyes opened wide, panic rising. Was it another creature? Were they digging her up to punish her more? She didn't know, but she felt air, sweet, real, air, touch her skin. Then, a sudden crack, light poured in, blinding her. A loud snap as the top of the box broke open. She coughed hard, chest heaving, and looked up into a face she'd never seen before. A man, tall, dark-haired, with strange eyes and a long jacket. Not her kind, a human. Elias froze. It wasn't a corpse, it was a living being. Alien, weak, starved, but alive. He pulled the cloth from her mouth, and she gasped sharply, falling forward. He caught her, gently, and wrapped a thermal blanket around her thin body. "You're okay," he whispered, not sure if she understood. "You're not dead." Talani couldn't speak his words, but she saw something in his eyes. Not fear, not hate, not the cold stares of her own people, but concern. He wasn't here to kill. He was here, by accident, yet he had saved her. Her fingers clung to his sleeve. She didn't know this man, didn't know what he wanted, but he had pulled her from the dirt. He hadn't walked away. She stared at him with glassy eyes, then looked around at the open sky. She was alive. Elias scanned her quickly, noticing bruises and dehydration. "She's been in there at least 12 hours, he said to himself. He didn't understand why someone would bury her alive, until he noticed the marks on the side of the box. Symbols, ritualistic ones. He knew them from old data logs. Infertile, they meant. His hands clenched into fists. He lifted her gently and carried her to his shuttle. Talani didn't resist, too weak to move on her own. Her mind floated between pain and confusion, but in that confusion, one word began to form inside her. Not her language, but the human word she'd just heard. "Okay," she whispered softly, brokenly. Elias looked down, surprised. He smiled just a little. "Yeah," he replied. "You'll be okay." As the ship lifted off into the sky, the hole in the ground remained, empty now, but forever marked. Tye. Lonnie should have died there, but fate had another plan, and the man who saved her didn't know yet that his lonely daughter would soon call this alien woman Mom. Talani lay on the small bed, her body wrapped in warmth she didn't recognize. The walls around her were smooth, silver, and quiet. A strange humming sound filled the space, like a gentle heartbeat. She opened her eyes slowly, afraid it had all been a dream. But no, this was not the ground, not the wooden box, not death. This was something new, something human. She turned her head and saw the man again, Elias, sitting near a glowing panel. He was tapping buttons, watching screens, but every few seconds, he glanced at her. Their eyes met briefly. He gave her a soft smile, unsure but kind. Talani looked away, her hands shaking. Her body ached, but her heart ached more. Why had he saved her? What did he want? She tried to sit up, but her strength failed. Elias stood quickly and held out a small cup with clear liquid. "Water," he said gently. She stared at it like it was a weapon, unsure. But then, slowly, her fingers reached out and took it. Her lips touched the edge, fresh, clean, life-giving. Tears welled in her eyes again, but she didn't let them fall. For hours, she said nothing. Just watched, listened, and tried to understand this strange human place. Elias didn't push her. He spoke softly now and then, mostly to himself. "Your vitals are stabilizing," he said once. "No fractures, but your ribs are bruised." She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. He wasn't angry, he wasn't mocking, he was helping. That evening the ship landed near a small shelter built between cliffs. It wasn't fancy, just metal walls and solar panels, but it was safe, and it was quiet. Elias carried her inside, placed her on a proper bed, and left food nearby, without touching her again. Talani didn't eat much, but the warmth of the place began to seep into her bones. She curled up under the blanket and for the first time in weeks slept without fear. The next morning, voices woke her. Not loud ones, but soft, curious ones. A small girl stood at the doorway, her eyes wide and shining. Her hair was golden, tied in messy knots, and her cheeks were freckled from the sun. This was Mira, Elias's daughter. She stared at Talani with wonder, not fear. "Is she an alien, Dad?" the girl whispered. Talani didn't understand the words, but the tone was innocent. Elias nodded, his voice gentle. "She's hurt, Mira. We must be kind." The girl stepped forward, holding something in her hand, a flower, rough and wild, freshly picked. She held it out with a shy smile. Talani blinked, unsure what to do. Her people never gave gifts, only judgments. But this little human was offering kindness. Slowly, with trembling fingers, Talani took the flower. Her lips parted, and a single breath escaped. "Thank you." Her voice was weak, broken, but real. Mira's smile grew wide. "She talks funny," she giggled. Then she sat down beside the bed without fear. Elias watched from the door, amazed. In just moments, Mira had done what no machine, no treatment, no tech ever could. She had given Talani a reason to breathe. Days passed. Talani began to move more, walk slowly, speak softly. She didn't know the human language, but she began to copy Mira's simple words. Eat. Warm. Safe. And sometimes... "Mom?" Elias didn't correct her. He just watched, and wondered. This woman, who was thrown away by her own people, now smiled at his daughter, held her hand, and followed her like a gentle shadow. One evening, Mira whispered to her father, "Can she stay forever?" Elias looked at Talani, sitting quietly near the window. He didn't answer right away, but deep inside, he already knew. She belonged here more than anyone else ever had. Later that night, Talani stood outside under the stars. She stared up at the sky, her skin glowing in the moonlight. Her hands clutched the flower Mira had given her. It had dried, but she refused to let it go. Behind her, Elias stood silently. He didn't say a word, just watched her. Talani spoke softly in her language. "I was dead, but now I live." Elias didn't understand, but he felt it, felt the meaning in her voice, the weight in her breath. He stepped beside her, close but not too close, and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." She turned to him, surprised, and this time, when their eyes met, she didn't look away. The next few days were slow and quiet. Talani stayed mostly inside, her steps light, her eyes always alert. She had survived death, but her heart still carried the fear. Fear of being thrown away again, fear of doing something wrong. But every time she looked at Mira, the little human girl who smiled at her without judgment, something inside her began to thaw. something old, something buried, something like love. Elias gave her space. He worked in his lab during the day, running reports, scanning samples, and keeping the shelter running, but he always checked on Talani before meals. He didn't speak too much, didn't pressure her, and slowly she stopped flinching at his voice, stopped freezing when he walked into a room. She began to watch him too, with quiet eyes full of questions. Mira, however, was a storm of joy. She had no fear, no hesitation. She dragged her new alien friend out into the soft sunlight one afternoon and giggled. Come with me. Talani didn't understand the words, but Mira's small hand in hers said enough. She followed, unsure, into the rocky field behind the shelter. The sky above was pale blue. The wind smelled of dust and dry plants. Mira ran ahead, arms stretched wide like wings. She spun in circles, fell down, laughed, and stood again. She picked strange flowers, sang strange songs, and danced with her feet bare. Talani stood still at first, watching from a few steps away. Her eyes blinked slowly, like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. A child, laughing, happy, alive, so different from the ones in her memories, the ones her tribe whispered about in Sham. She had always been told she was empty, broken, less than a woman. Mothers raised children, women gave life. She gave nothing, so she was nothing. Until now a little human girl was tugging on her hand. Mira pointed at the flowers and said something fast, smiling wide. Talani didn't understand, but she crouched down, gently touched one of the flowers, and then looked at Mira. The child nodded, excited. Yes, pretty. Then Mira picked two and gave one to Talani, placing it behind her ear. Now you look pretty too. Talani froze, her fingers rising to touch the soft petals. No one had ever called her beautiful, not once, not even when she was young. Her people only saw her fault, not her face, but Mira didn't care. Mira saw something else, something Talani couldn't yet see in herself. They spent hours outside. Mira built towers from stones, jumped over puddles, and made up stories about cloud shapes. Talani stayed close, sometimes helping, sometimes just watching. When Mira fell, scraping her knee, she cried out. Talani rushed to her without thinking, heart racing. She lifted the child, brushed the dirt from her skin, and held her close. Her arms moved on their own, rocking gently, soothing without words. Mira sniffled and buried her face in Talani's shoulder. It hurts, she whispered. Talani tightened her embrace and spoke in her soft alien tongue. Shh, you're safe. Mira didn't understand the words, but she felt the meaning, the warmth, the comfort, the care, and she smiled through her tears. You sound like a mom, she said quietly. Talani froze again. That word, mom, cut deep and strange, not like a wound, but like sunlight breaking through darkness. She had never been called that before. She wasn't supposed to be one, but now, was she? Elias stood nearby, unnoticed. He had followed when he saw the two walk out. He didn't want to interrupt, but watch. Hing them. Mira held in Talani's arms, safe and loved. He felt a lump rise in his throat. It had been years since Mira's mother died. He had never seen his daughter this happy, this at peace. And Talani, this broken stranger from the dirt, was giving Mira something he couldn't. That evening, over dinner, Mira leaned against Talani and said, "Can I call you Tani, Mom?" Talani blinked, unsure if she had heard right. Elias looked up, surprised. Mira smiled again, waiting. Talani looked at Elias, confused. He paused, then gently translated. "She's asking if she can call you her mom." Talani's hands trembled slightly. She looked down at Mira's wide, innocent eyes, and slowly she nodded. Yes, she said softly. Mira cheered, wrapping her arms around Talani tight. Talani held her back, eyes closed, heart open for the first time in her life. That night, as Mira slept peacefully between them, Elias whispered to Talani, "You're doing more than I ever could." She didn't reply, just placed her hand over Mira's chest and smiled. For the first time, Talani didn't feel broken. She didn't feel empty. She felt full. The days had become peaceful. Mira played without fear. Talani smiled more often, and Elias worked with a quiet heart. Their little shelter, hidden between the cliffs, felt like a secret world, one where pain was fading and something gentle was growing in its place. But peace, like a dream, is never guaranteed to last. It began with a shadow in the sky, a strange shape, sharp, dark, and moving fast. Elias looked up, frowning. It wasn't one of his drones, and it wasn't part of any Earth mission. His fingers raced across the panel, scanning the object. Then his breath caught. The results flashed red. Unidentified alien vessel. Confirmed species match. Talani's origin tribe. He stepped back from the screen, his heart heavy. He hadn't told Talani much about space traffic. She was healing, and he didn't want to frighten her. But now it was too late. They had found her. He didn't know how, but they had. That evening, as the stars came out, Elias made sure the outer alarms were armed. He checked the escape pod underground, the food reserves, and even packed a small emergency bag for Mira. Talani noticed his tension. She tilted her head, placing a hand lightly on his arm. Her eyes asked the question her mouth didn't. Elias sighed, then whispered, "Someone is coming, Talani." She stared at him, confused at first. Then her body stiffened. Her breath shook. She didn't need more words. She knew. She turned and rushed to Mira's room, watching the girl sleep peacefully under soft blankets. Talani sat beside her, brushing a hand through the golden strands of hair. Mira murmured something in her sleep, then smiled. Talani closed her eyes, whispering her own silent prayer. Not to any god, but to whatever force had brought her here. She would not let anyone take this from her. Not again. The next morning, the sky was quiet again. But Elias knew it wouldn't stay that way. He told Talani to stay inside while he checked the perimeter. She obeyed at first, until the sound of footsteps echoed across the rocks. Not his footsteps, heavy ones, and more than one. Talani grabbed Mira and pulled her into the hidden storage room, whispering softly, "Quiet, stay here." Mira didn't argue. She saw the fear in Talani's eyes. She curled up under a metal blanket, hugging the stuffed toy Talani had made for her. Talani stepped back into the hallway, heart pounding. Outside, 3 alien figures stood in front of Elias. Their armor was worn but sharp, their weapons charged. The leader had silver markings on his face, the mark of a tribal enforcer. "We've come for her," he said in a cold voice. "She is property of the old rite." Elias stood firm. "She's not your property," he replied quietly. "She's not your problem anymore." The alien's eyes narrowed. She was buried as tradition demands. She was taken. She must be returned to the soil. Behind him was, one of the others spit on the ground. "She is cursed." Elias felt anger rise in his chest, but before he could speak again, Talani stepped out. She stood tall, even though her body shook. Her eyes locked onto the leaders. "I will not go," she said in her own language. "I have life now. I have meaning." The leader took a step forward. "You are empty, and the empty must not remain." Talani moved between him and the shelter. Behind her, Elias raised his blaster, his jaw tight. Mira peeked from the window, her voice trembling. "Mom?" she called out softly. The word echoed across the rocks like a bell. The aliens froze. Talani turned her head slightly, just enough to see Mira's small form. Then she stepped forward, lifting her chin high. "I was empty," she said, "but I have been filled. Not by blood, by love." She pointed at Mira. "She calls me mother." The leader's face twitched. "Blasphemy," he hissed. Elias stepped beside Talani now, weapon steady. "You're not taking her," he said calmly. The aliens looked at him with disgust. "A human bonded with her?" The leader shook his head. "This planet will burn." Talani reached for Elias's hand, not in fear, but in strength. "If they attack," she whispered, "I will protect her." Elias nodded. "So will I." The aliens turned and walked away without a word, but their silence was worse than threats. This was not over. As the ship disappeared into the horizon, Elias turned to Talani. "We have to prepare," he said. She nodded, her eyes still on the sky. "I will not let them bury me again," she whispered, "and I will not let them touch my daughter." Elias didn't sleep that night. He sat at his control panel, eyes fixed on the motion tracker. Nothing moved on the outer screen, no life forms, no energy pulses, but he knew better. The silence after a threat wasn't safety, it was warning. It meant they would return, and next time, they would not talk. Talani stood beside the window, her arms crossed tightly around herself. She hadn't spoken in hours. Mira slept peacefully in her room, unaware of the danger, but Talani could feel it rising, like dark clouds building before a storm. Her tribe had never changed. They didn't accept change. They crushed it. Elias finally turned away from the screen and looked at her. "We can't wait for them," he said. She nodded slowly, already knowing what he would say next. "We run," she whispered. He led her to the far corner of the shelter, past a locked metal hatch hidden under the floor. With a press of his handprint, it opened, revealing a narrow staircase leading underground. "This was built in case of planetary failure," he explained. "It's a one-way pod, short range, stealth-equipped." Talani looked down the stairs, then back at Elias. "Will it fit us?" He nodded. All three. The plan was simple, but painful. They would gather essentials, food, medicine, Mira's few belongings, then launch at sunrise before the aliens returned. The pod would take them to an unmonitored moon nearby, uninhabited, green, safe, a fresh start. But time moved faster than fear. While Talani packed quietly, Mira walked in, rubbing her eyes. "Mom, where are we going?" Talani knelt down and hugged her tightly. "We are going somewhere better," she said softly. Mira tilted her head. "Why? Are the bad people coming back?" Elias joined them and crouched down. "They might," he said gently, "but we won't let them hurt you." Mira didn't cry. She looked between them and then smiled bravely. "Okay, I'll help pack." And she did, stuffing her favorite blanket, her toy, and the dried flour she had given Talani into a small bag. Later that evening, as the shelter dimmed its lights for night mode, they heard something, a faint clicking sound outside, then silence. Elias froze, holding a scanner up. His voice dropped to a whisper. "They've marked the walls." Talani's face paled. "That's a sign," she said. "They're watching, waiting, claiming the area." Elias gritted his teeth. "Then we leave now." They moved quickly. Talani carried Mira down the stairs, whispering comfort in her native tongue. Elias followed, sealing the hatch above them with a magnetic lock. The pod was small but clean, with 3 padded seats and a narrow window facing the stars. Talani placed Mira in the middle seat, wrapping her in the blanket. Mira yawned and leaned against her side. "I like space," she mumbled sleepily. Talani kissed her forehead gently. "Then you'll love where we're going." Elias powered up the engines, his hands steady despite the pressure. The ship hummed softly, preparing for launch. But just before ignition, the tracker beeped, red dots moving fast across the outer screen. "They're here," Elias said. Talani gripped Mira tighter. The sound of weapons firing above shook the tunnel. Dust rained from the ceiling. The structure groaned. "They've found the hatch," Elias growled. He slammed the ignition button. The pod vibrated hard, then shot upward through the escape shaft. Outside, blasts lit the sky as alien weapons searched for heat signatures. But the pod stayed cloaked, silent as a whisper. They passed the cliffs, the clouds, then burst into the stars. Inside the pod, Mira clapped softly. "Whee!" That was fun. Talani and Elias shared a tired smile. The danger wasn't over. But for now, they were free. As they drifted through space, heading toward the moon, Talani looked down at Mira. The girl had fallen asleep in her lap, fingers curled around the blanket. Elias reached across and handed Talani a small screen. "This is where we're going," he said, showing a picture of a lush, green world. No cities, no scanners, no tribal laws. Just peace. Talani stared at the image, tears quietly slipping down her cheeks. Not tears of fear, but of something she had never allowed herself to feel. Hope. She took Elias's hand for the first time. Not from fear, not from weakness, but from strength. And softly, she whispered, "You saved me." Elias shook his head. "You saved her," he said, pointing at Mira. And she saved us both, the pod said. Led on, glowing against the stars, behind them was a world of hate. Ahead, a world where love would write the next chapter. The stars blinked above the small pod as it drifted toward freedom. Below them, the planet they left behind glowed with the light of fire and vengeance. They had escaped the tribe's grip, but not their fury. Talani held Mira close, feeling every tremble of the pod's engine as it fought against gravity's last pull. Her heart was heavy but steady. She would not fall again. Not this time. Elias sat beside them, scanning the sky for threats. His fingers danced across controls, adjusting coordinates, shielding their energy trail. "The cloak won't last long," he muttered. "They're tracking something. Maybe Mira's heat signature, maybe yours." Talani looked down at the sleeping girl in her lap. Her chest rose and fell softly, unaware of the war in the stars around her. "We cannot let them take her," Talani whispered. Elias nodded. "We won't." Just then, the warning light flashed. Red, fast, blinking like a heartbeat in panic. Elias leaned forward, eyes wide. Hostile vessel approaching, direct path. Talani's breath caught. "They're coming." The pod shook violently as a laser beam streaked past them, missing by meters. Alarms screamed. Systems blinked in distress. Mira woke with a cry, clutching her mother tightly. "What's happening?" Talani kissed her forehead, whispering, "It's okay, little star. Close your eyes." The enemy ship came into view, dark metal, sharp wings, no mercy in its form. It fired again, grazing their side, sparks flying across the pod's wall. Elias gritted his teeth. "One more hit like that, and we lose steering." He turned to Talani, eyes sharp. "We need a distraction." Talani didn't hesitate. "What do I do?" Elias pointed to a panel. "Unseal the secondary flare bay. Release 3 decoys." She moved fast, fingers shaky but determined. The pod released the flares. 3 balls of glowing heat shooting out in opposite directions. The alien ship paused, confused by the sudden scatter. That was their chance. Elias pushed the pod into a sharp dive toward the surface of the moon below. The pod groaned, its frame protesting the speed. Inside, Talani wrapped her body around Mira, shielding her from the shaking and noise. Elias pulled the manual controls, steering through clouds and dust. One hit to the fuel lines, and it would be over. But the flares had bought them seconds, just enough. Below them, the moon came into view. Forests, hills, soft green rivers winding through valleys. No buildings, no towers, no cities. Only nature. Elias locked onto a clearing and aimed. "Brace," he warned. The pod hit the ground hard, sliding across grass and rocks, sparks bursting from beneath. It finally stopped with a loud crack, but the frame held. Silence, then a soft cry. "I'm scared," Mira whispered. Talani held her tighter, kissing her cheek. "You're safe. You're safe." Elias unbuckled himself and checked the systems. "The pod's damaged, but we made it," he said, voice shaking. Talani reached for the door release, and fresh air rushed inside. They stepped out into a world of green. The grass beneath their feet was soft, the sky above bright and blue. Bird-like creatures chirped in the distance, and flowers glowed gently under the light. Mira gasped. "It's beautiful." Talani smiled. "For the first time since the escape. Yes, it is." But the beauty was not safety yet. They had to move, hide, build. Elias grabbed the survival packs and scanned the horizon. "There's a cave formation nearby. We can set up there." Talani took Mira's hand and followed. She did not look back at the broken pod. She had learned long ago, some things must be left behind to protect what matters. As they reached the cave, Elias sealed the entrance with a portable shield net. Inside, they lit small lights, unrolled sleeping mats, and checked Mira for injuries. She was tired but unharmed, still smiling, still safe. Talani sat beside her, watching her drift off to sleep. Elias sat across from her, back against the cave wall. "You were brave," he said softly. Talani shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I was scared, but I had something to protect." She looked down at Mira. She gave me something I thought I'd never have. A reason to live. Elias nodded. And now you've given her something she's never had either. A mother who'd fight through fire for her. Talani stared at the flickering light on the wall. Her mind flashed back to the wooden box, the cold soil pressing against her skin. And then she looked around. Warm cave, green world, her daughter's breath soft beside her. Yes, she had walked through fire, but she was still standing. And she wasn't alone anymore. The morning light touched the cave softly. Golden beams slipped through the cracks above, falling on Mira's sleeping face. Talani sat beside her, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Her fingers gently brushed the girl's hair. Each strand, each breath, reminded her. This was real, not a dream, not a second chance, a new life. Outside, birds with blue wings sang in low melodies. The green moon they had landed on was quiet, untouched by war or ancient laws. There were no tribes here, no marks carved into stone declaring worth or worthlessness. Only nature, only peace. Elias returned from the hillside carrying a basket full of bright fruits and long roots. He had made tools from parts of the escape pod and had begun marking out a flat space near the stream. We can build a small shelter here, he said, smiling. Not much, but strong. Talani nodded, standing with Mira at her side. Her eyes scanned the trees, the water, the sky. It was beautiful, it was safe, and most of all, it was theirs. Over the next days, they worked together. Elias built with his hands, using knowledge from Earth and parts from the ship. Talani gathered wood and berries, learning what was safe, what was sweet. And Mira? She danced around them both, laughing, singing, picking flowers for their new home. Each night, they lit a small fire, sat together, and shared whatever they had. Each night, Mira would curl up beside Talani, holding her hand tightly. "Good night, Mom," she would whisper. And each night, Talani would whisper back, "Good night, little star." But one evening, something changed. As the sun fell behind the hills, Elias brought out a small stone carving. It was smooth, shaped like a heart, with two names etched into it in both Earth and alien script. He placed it at the entrance of the cave. "For those who choose each other," he said. Talani stepped forward, eyes wide. "What is this?" Elias smiled softly. "A name stone. Something my people place when a family is made." She stared at it, her fingers tracing the carved words. Her name and Mira's name, side by side. No blood bond, no contract, just chosen, and above them, a space left open. She looked at Elias, confused. "You left a space," he nodded. "For yours, if you want it." Talani looked at Mira, who was smiling wide. The girl ran up and whispered, "Put Mom there." Talani smiled. "No," she said softly. "I will put my real name, but a new one." That night, she sat alone under the stars, thinking. She had been born as Talani, branded, discarded, buried, but here, under this sky, she had been called something else. Mom, protector, hope. She picked up a stone and carved slowly, carefully, each letter written with love, not shame. When morning came, Elias and Mira found the stone complete, her new name carved boldly beside theirs. Talanira, it read. In her language it meant mother of life. Talani looked at Elias and spoke quietly. "This name is not from my past. It is from my daughter's voice and your kindness. I was buried as something broken. But here, I am something new." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we begin as who we truly are." And from that day, their life truly began, no longer hiding, no longer running, but bibao. Building, growing, living, seasons passed. The home grew stronger, filled with laughter and warmth. Talanira taught Mira her native songs, and Mira taught her how to draw stars on stone. Elias planted crops, wrote notes in his journal about the new world, and each night they gathered around their fire, like a family always meant to be. Tilanira never forgot the dark soil that once tried to take her, but she no longer feared it, because from that soil, a seed had grown, a seed called love, and on this moon, this forgotten quiet place, that love became everything.